Perfect, and good morning everybody from Amsterdam, and good morning to you, Adriaan, in Rotterdam, I believe. So it's a nice sunny morning here at least, and we have a lot to cover today, and I'm so happy to see so many people who have joined our little masterclass that we're going to have about this very interesting topic called DORA that we all love so much. So we have a lot to cover, which means that we have roughly 1 hour, and we also hopefully want to leave some time in the end for some questions as well. So, in matter of fact, I'm going to get straight into it. First of all, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Today we're going to discuss DORA, and more specifically Article 8 and mapping of critical functions. For those of you who don't know who Einar and Partners are, or maybe haven't seen us before, very briefly, we are a boutique partner, as we call it, a strategy firm in IT operations management and also AI ops. We're also quite platform agnostic, which means that we are focusing a lot on governance, regulations, etc. But I also like to consider ourselves experts in service modelings, IT operating models, and more these days as well, creating like contextual layers for AI and AI agents. But perhaps more importantly, and why we are here today, is because we've now the past 3-4 years worked with over 25 different banks and financial institutions, which we're very proud of having in our portfolio. And it's really through that work, together with our research, that we've been able to create excellent expertise in the topic of DORA. So just some housekeeping. So what we're going to learn and what we're going to go through today is, first of all, let's call it the benchmark reality. So we have done quite a lot of benchmarks with the industry. We're also going to deep dive together with you, Adriaan, a little bit into specifically the DORA Article 8, especially on like modeling the data, how do we model critical functions, and then based on our own field experience, like I said before, we also have a 6-step playbook that we would like to show a little bit around. Also, just some housekeeping. There is a possibility to ask questions in a Q&A box. So I believe that should be possible for all in the audience to do. So if you have any questions, then just type it in the Q&A. If it's something quick and simple, we'll try to answer it on the spot. If it's something a bit more, complex, then we will get back to you after the webinar. As well, this session is being recorded. So we will share the recording with you. It will be published on our YouTube channel. So feel free to share it with colleagues or other industry peers that you think may be interested in this topic. But of course, we should also introduce ourselves. So my name is Alexander Ljungström. I'm the founder and managing director here at Einar and Partners, and I'm very passionate about the topic of DORA. Maybe less from the regulatory perspective, but more actually from the perspective of governance, organizational psychology, and how do we essentially build a more resilient society together, especially in this day and age of 2026. So I'm super excited to sit here today and share some of our insights and experiences. But more importantly, I'm very excited to have you, Adriaan, on board. So Adriaan, who are you? Explain a little bit who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Adriaan. Actually, so my background, I used to work for one financial organization here in the Netherlands, and yeah, I have actually worked with DORA from up close, and then mainly from a configuration management ITOM perspective in service now with the CMDB, mapping a lot of different requirements, and yeah, the whole journey that most of you probably recognize. Joined Einar and Partners a year ago, and actually had the chance to work with several clients on DORA, becoming more of an expert also on the regulatory part of it and understanding what are those requirements. And here today. Really excited to share a bit around how we see that CSDM and a proper service framework can really benefit organizations to become more DORA compliant and moreover to become more operational resilient as well. So really excited to host this session with you today.
Yeah, thanks, Adriaan. And on that topic, what I'm also excited about here is the fact that we're not going to come in here today with high-level general sales pitches, and because there's been a lot of webinars and other things around DORA and around ServiceNow, etc. So I'm hoping that we're able to bring some really tangible lessons for everyone here today. So let's get straight into it. And to set the scene a little bit before we go into the practicalities, which you will share, Adriaan, I'd like to speak a little bit around the DORA benchmarks that our research unit has been doing, which I'm also very proud of. So actually what we have done, and which is, apart from our own experience working in projects and so forth, then the research unit of Einar and Partners spent over 6 months of research tracking up to almost 20 European financial institutions through surveys, through interviews, and in a nutshell, we measured over 100 data points. And the 3 main areas that we were looking at is the overall industrial readiness of critical functions, the DORA register of information, but then of course, what is so important, governance and reporting aspects. So this is what lays as a little bit of the foundation for a lot of the data and the decision making that we typically bring in to our engagements and projects then. And jumping straight into that, it's going to be quite a lot of graphs. It's going to be quite a lot of slides. So I will not have time to read through word by word each and every one of them. But as I said before, this recording will be available, but more importantly, we also have an in-depth benchmark report on almost 30 pages, which is basically touching upon all of these graphs. But starting with the foundational and governance pieces, then what are we actually seeing here then? Well, if we look at most organizations, people may believe that like critical functions and important functions, also known as CIFs, that everyone is there, but that's actually not the case. As a matter of fact, what the research is showing, still in the year 2026, again, this is very, very fresh research here, is that 3 out of 4 organizations have not yet fully registered the DORA critical or important functions, and only a small minority actually have them fully formalized in place. So the implication being basically that despite DORA being, active for such a long time, we still see that organizations and financial institutions are actively working on this. And when people are identifying these CIFs or critical functions, then typically there tends to be some sort of classification framework driving that. And there's things like criticalities, how important are things, and when we look at that, same there, is there formal classification frameworks? And over a third is saying that they still don't yet have a formalized classification frameworks. And some do, but it tends to be quite manually driven in documents. And less than 1 out of 5 actually have it standardized and applied in ServiceNow or a similar platform. So again, this points a little bit on the fact that having structured classification frameworks for how we identify and how we break down our critical functions, that's still very much a work ongoing, actually. And often what that attached to in the end of the day is that there should be a DORA register of information. And one of the questions that we ask then is, how advanced really have we come on that journey? And have organizations really established their DORA register of information, especially for the critical ICT services and dependencies? Here is starting to look a little bit better. A handful still is on the clear no. Most people, they have planned it but not started. And then a smaller minority, they are in progress of doing this today, but then a very small minority has it fully implemented and maintained. So again, if we sort of look here at the key takeaway, what we see is that in a nutshell, DORA registry information is still largely manually pulled together, and the information tends to still be quite siloed, to be frank. So a lot of work can still be done in this area, clearly. And often when we look at these critical functions then, and these CIFs as they are known, then another important aspect of that is service ownership. So for those of you who have maybe worked in ServiceNow for a long time, who have used CMDBs, etc., service owners is probably not a new concept, but one of the dimensions that we were looking at in our research is, do the organizations, the financial institutions, have the service owners actually responsible for mapping these services that are part of the critical functions in the CMDB? And same here, quite a clear majority actually is saying no. And you, Adriaan, will speak about this a little bit later, I believe, on the topic of clear service ownership. But here is quite a big gap actually between service ownership and the critical or important functions, which for me is very interesting. And finally, we're looking, of course, as we're working with ServiceNow here, we're looking at here, are the critical process owners formally accountable for keeping the ServiceNow data up to date? And same there, quite a large majority is saying no. And then a very small minority is saying yes, they are fully accountable, and equally smaller majority partially accountable. So again, accountability is one of those critical factors actually when we're looking at process ownership and who is actually maintaining that data. Because before DORA, critical functions, they might not have existed in a formalized way. Sure, any bank or financial institutions, they have their important processes, payouts or general ledgers or whatever it is, but then actually assigning ownership on that process and having that process owner being accountable for the data, that is sort of the new dimension which is being introduced here. As you can see, I'm jumping through quickly here, so if anyone has any questions throughout, again, just use the Q&A box, and also you, Adriaan, if you want to jump in here, just feel free to. But the next topic here, which I want to show here a little bit around, is how do we then map the critical services and dependencies? So in a nutshell, how well do organizations actually understand their service dependencies? And we're looking again here at critical functions. Sorry, I'm seeing some people raising their hands. I'm not sure if that does anything, raising your hand, but if you have any questions, then do use the Q&A box. But yeah, so critical functions registered and visible in ServiceNow then. So if applicable, are these critical functions even registered there? And the key takeaway is that 45% of the organizations have not yet registered their critical functions in ServiceNow. Only 18% have full registration there. So again, in order to sort of operationalize this, it's important that the critical functions don't just remain like a paper product or a PowerPoint slide or something like that, but it actually needs to be digitalized. And I believe this is an area you, Adriaan, have worked quite a lot with, sort of transferring what is, let's say, system architectures in a PowerPoint format or in C4 modeling or something into ServiceNow, if I'm not mistaken. So digitalization.
Right, yeah. So I see there is a comment about the slides not being visible for everyone. I'm just checking. Maybe you can reshare your screen. I do see it, but...
I do not see the slides. That would be awful. Okay, I hope it's only one person who's not seeing the slides because, if there is some more people here who's sitting in the webinar and not seeing the slides, then please just type in the Q&A immediately. But I'm hoping that it's only, for some random reason, a bug for one person. No, okay. Other people are writing that they can see the slides. So
Right.
for whoever person who can't see the slide, I'm really sorry. I'm hoping you follow the the line of thinking and the statistics here that we're speaking about. Okay, so our third-party dependencies then fully mapped. So this is of course a critical part of DORA Article 8 and other things. It's actually understanding not only what do we depend on ourselves, but the third-party dependencies. So looking into these critical functions, have we actually tied in the third-party dependencies? And again, large majority there saying not yet. And just to put some texture onto this, third-party dependencies is not enough to just say, oh, we rely on Azure, oh, we rely on AWS or the switches and routers or something like that. No, we tend to need to be pretty specific. We tend to need to be able to have to point specifically what aspects in Azure, for example, is our critical function dependent on, which particular parts of a third-party data lake or whatever it is it that is important. So again, what we see here is that to actually manage risk, it's super important to have the full picture of these services to critical functions, but also how that ties into third-party aspects then essentially. And especially if you want to open an incident, you want to know exactly which third party is involved, of course. We have had a perspective here of looking into our organizations leveraging ServiceNow for dependency mapping. And for those of you who maybe are not super well versatile in ServiceNow and so forth, today I'm not going to explain too much in depth the concepts of ServiceNow discovery or service mapping. If you're interested in that, Einar and Partners have a YouTube channel where you can find tons and tons of videos and masterclasses about this. But the question is basically, are we using some sort of automation or service mapping to actually map these third-party dependencies and critical and important functions? And actually there a large majority is saying no. So most organizations, they are not fully leveraging ServiceNow for this dependency mapping. There are, of course, some people who are doing it partially, and then a small minority who is doing it quite extensively. But the implication here is that we want to try and automate as much as possible, because otherwise the dependencies, they will remain incomplete, static, error prone, and ultimately actually limiting the impact analysis for incidents, changes, all sorts of things really. All right, so the next part that we looked at is the data quality and overall CMDB maturity. And that's, of course, a very, very broad topic. So we zoom that in particular then on the critical functions, on Article 8 and from like a DORA context. Because you could have theoretically quite good CMDB maturity in general, but then when you are going to work with regulators and DORA and so forth, that's where the gaps may arise. And what we see there is, first of all, how reliable is the CMDB data for mapping critical services? And what we ask then these organizations is to rate the data quality of their CMDB, specifically then in relation to these critical or important functions or CIFs. It's not awful. So most people say that it's moderately reliable, it's usable, but there are some gaps. But there are also some organizations who are saying it's poor with partial coverage or very poor with largely incomplete or completely inaccurate. So essentially what we're saying is that 64% of organizations, they do rate their CMDB as moderately usable, but there are gaps. But very few can proudly say that we have high quality, complete data ready for regulators to completely take a look at in order to map the critical functions. And of course, I think this is something that both you and me, Adriaan, have experienced quite a lot, which is that once we start with mapping critical functions, the classic thing of business versus IT is becoming even more important, because when we're speaking about critical functions, especially in the context of a financial institution, it's not just the IT department, but you may need to speak to the insurance part, the bank part, all sorts of parts, which we would consider the business. And what we then asked is, how frequently do organizations experience a misalignment there between the business and IT on these critical process identifications? And there, the statistics is also quite telling that most people are experiencing some misalignment, either sometimes or very often. Very few organizations have, I would say, formalized governance structures where, you know, these two worlds come together in, let's say, a frictionless way. So again, we see that too often business and IT, they operate in silos. That's essentially what this is about in a nutshell. So the final statistics, and then I'm going to hand over to you, Adriaan, where we can deep dive a little bit more into the know-hows and the practicalities around this. But the final statistics here is around the operations, reporting, and compliance execution. So BCM, or business continuity management, is very important. So that's, of course, an aspect that we asked. How well integrated is that with the critical service data? And then there, what we see is that a large majority, well, it's quite a large majority, almost half is saying that BCM practices is still not integrated. Smaller majority is saying limited integration. And then, you know, a third is saying that it's fully integrated. So my take on this is it's almost like on or off. So either people haven't integrated it at all or very limited, or they have gone fully integrated it. So the connection between BCM and these critical functions, essentially. And another aspect is regulatory reporting. So how much can we automate the reporting from ServiceNow to support regulatory submissions, for example, the register of information or incident reports, etc. And just to put some texture to this, depending on which country you're working in, this may look differently. Like I'm Swedish, so I've worked a lot with Swedish clients, and then the reporting is literally like a JSON payload that you are supposed to send to the regulatory bodies. But if we're looking here, how much automation is in place, then, most people, it's still manual process. Some people, they have it partially automated, but a small minority has it fully automated, actually. So in a nutshell, manual regulatory reporting keeps organizations reactive. And our perspective from Einar Partners is that true operational resilience actually requires automated, data-driven reporting that is current, consistently reproducible, and which is audit ready. So not just assembled ad hoc, under pressure when the incident is occurring or has already occurred, then it's almost a little bit too late. But this level of reporting needs to be reliably consistent. So to summarize this, and I think we're quite good in time, and then I'm going to hand over to you, Adriaan, is that if we look at some of the key success factors then for the DORA execution, then this may sound a bit generic for some of you, but Adriaan, you will speak more about this soon, but strong ownership obviously incredibly critical. So it's not just ownership about systems. It's not just ownerships about applications, but actually service ownerships and ideally as well ownerships of the CIFs or critical functions. What we see is that automation drives scalability. Again, that may sound like a statement which sounds very obvious, but for the DORA register of information, moving towards automation, having that consistency, that is really, you know, what regulators ideally are expecting. And then integration enables resilience. So just having the data model is not good enough, but actually being able to integrate the wider landscape here, BCM, business impact assessments, other aspects, that's really when this starts to become powerful for regulators, but not only for regulators, actually, also for the organization itself. This should not just be a check in the box, but we all have a duty to care about operational resilience. So that was quite a handful of statistics, and I think from that point onward, then the stage is yours, Adriaan. So what have we learned from the past couple of years? If you go ahead and share your screen.
Yes, so let's get a bit more practical now as well. So yeah, what you already mentioned as well is, yeah, we see that DORA Article 8 is actually the main driver for a lot of the other aspects of DORA that need to be captured. So yeah, before we dive a bit deeper, yeah, we would like to understand what is DORA Article 8 about. And yeah, so what you see for DORA, it's actually, yeah, the reporting is done in the ITS reporting framework. And you see here the different RT numbers, the different pillars that we see are, yeah, very well captured in Article 8 and really, yeah, the backbone of that DORA compliance as well. So first of all, making sure that you have those critical important functions defined, and also that you have the different dependencies mapped as well, and that you understand the data flow, that you understand how that connects to risk and compliance. Then the other aspect, to have clear accountability in place, that you understand the different third parties as well, where they come in, where they support on and on which DORA critical function. And yeah, moreover, where we also spoke about the DORA register of information, it's then also important that we link those contracts of those third parties as well, that we understand the legal entities that are involved of the company, and also where they connect to which service, and ultimately which critical function is making use of that as well. So yeah, that's kind of the backbone of DORA Article 8, and where we see that the CMDB and CSDM can support. Then looking here, like when we typically come in on a project, there's 3 areas that we support on that are very much aligned with DORA Article 8. So we help organizations to establish a clear operating model. So making sure that we have that accountability in place, that we understand the different objects that are involved as well, and the different relations between them as well. And yeah, it starts with the ICT asset inventory, obviously in DORA, but it's a backbone of afterwards also being able to do incident reporting on it, to do testing on that, and having really the up-to-date documentation around that as well. So, and the other area there is the data model itself. So having that inventory of IT assets in place, having the relationship towards the different DORA critical functions is really needed to then afterwards also doing your ICT risk management, and also making sure that we can do that business continuity and disaster recovery management. This is really like the backbone of everything. Without clear data, without these clear dependencies mapped, it's hard to do the other requirements of DORA. So that's why we see that to have that to have this foundation good in place is crucial, and even better if you have it within one platform like ServiceNow in CSDM. CSDM really brings that structure, and I will show you in a moment also how that could look like. And typically when we come into an organization, we pick out one or two of their most critical functions, and we actually do some kind of pilot, and we start to actually map it fully from end to end. So looking at the different IT components that are involved, different applications that it's depending on, which infrastructure it actually needs, really making that full picture and also linking it to the contracts. So really doing that identification part of DORA Article 8. And then we can also quickly show to the organization that then afterwards they can use that data. So they can use that in the ICT incident management process. So quickly they can see, hey, I have an incident on this server. Ooh, it's actually impacting one of our DORA critical functions. So alarm bells, we can start the reporting also to the regulatory quickly. And obviously we try to solve the incident as quickly as possible. But also in our digital operational resilience testing, obviously we can also show these are the components that we need to prioritize as well in that testing, that we have proper test plans and test cases in place for these components as well. And obviously we make sure that monitoring is taken care of. Also one of the DORA articles or requirements in Article 8 and 13. And in 15, planning for business continuity, making sure we have a disaster recovery plan in place. If you don't know what we need to include there, then it's hard to actually manage that as well. So that's where we say the engine of DORA is actually DORA Article 8, and it has such a big impact. If you properly do that, if you have that backbone properly modeled in a tool like ServiceNow in CSDM, it can truly help you in the other components of DORA as well. So so we actually also created this maturity model to actually showcase to organizations. So when we come in, we can then also assess what is the current state and where is effort needed. And here you see the different levels and the different components. So it's obviously, first of all, it's important to have the foundational data in place, that you know the companies, that you know the different contracts, the different locations, that we know the different critical functions, that they are being defined as well, and also linked to the basic services that are involved. So that's typically where we see the organizations are at. So they usually have already their critical functions, at least on paper, have a bit of an idea of it. It's maybe not properly defined yet, but that's where we then support on as well. And then we really help them to move up in the maturity model. So making sure that the dependencies are properly mapped, that we also have those contracts linked there, that we have SLAs there, that we understand how this connects to BCM, and so on and so on. So that's where this maturity model can really help to also plan for becoming more DORA compliant. So
sorry, Einar, can I ask you something if you go back there? So, because I think one of the things that we have sometimes encountered when we work with different financial institutions is this topic of like which level should we put the CIFs on? And I think that sometimes we see that like some organizations, they tend to define incredibly broad CIFs, and then other people maybe like a bit too granular. Could you speak on behalf of that, and what's your experience there, and what you have seen? Like does that resonate with you?
That definitely resonates. So obviously there's a whole reporting towards DORA as well, and towards those CIFs. And typically when we come in, we see that like things like payments is defined as a CIF, which is like quite a big thing to say, that the whole payments component of a bank is actually DORA critical, because that means that basically also your entire IT landscape is almost DORA critical as well. And when we then look at it in more detail, we actually see it's not the whole payments that is DORA critical, but it's more parts of payments that are DORA critical. So we also typically help with that as well. So we dive a bit deeper and we start to understand that, for example, for insurance, it's not the full insurance that is DORA critical, but the actual payout of the insurance, sending that payment to the other financial institute, that is what is DORA critical. So yeah, we help to also map that granularity and to have that properly defined as well. So yeah, that's actually a good point as well. So that's typically in where an organization might think they are already fully aligned. So they then, we can actually highlight that it's a bit too broad what they have defined as a DORA critical function. And then we spend some time in
I think that is so interesting, because we've been in some organizations where we go there and they like, we have 5 critical important functions, and in other organizations we have 250, and the truth is probably somewhere maybe in the middle. So
exactly, and that's the thing, right? At the end of the day, it also needs to be maintainable as well. So that's where we need to meet somewhere in the middle and truly understand it. But how does that look then from a data model perspective? So how can we actually map those DORA requirements to CSDM in a tool like ServiceNow? So what we see is that CSDM can actually help to provide that operational view. So we can actually link different components to it. So obviously, if we work within ServiceNow, there are different processes that can make use of it. So we can use it in our incident, problem, and change management. So especially important for the incident reporting part of DORA. There is also the business continuity model within ServiceNow. So there, obviously we can do it within ServiceNow, or we can connect it to any other tool that is used for business continuity management. And it can then also make use of that live data in the CMDB. So it doesn't become something that is like, meeting people, talking to people. No, it's actually based on proper data that is also being maintained. And we can then also link it to contract management. We can automate things, as you already mentioned as well. So having tools in place like discovery or service mapping or other integrations to really, having that, that data up to date, real time, available when we need it for any of these processes. And then on the right side, you then also see how such a service model can look like. So these are typically the objects that are then involved. And that gives that full traceability, and that can also be used for impact analysis. So if we look at the model itself, this might be a bit overwhelming, but actually let me use a pointer to run you through this. So here it all starts in what ServiceNow calls the design and planning domain. So typically that's where you have your business application. So here you see there is a business application for Know Your Customer. And for DORA, what we have done with clients is then actually link our critical important functions in there. So that can be defined as a business capability, it can be defined as a business process, or there is also like this DORA accelerator module within ServiceNow that can be used if you have risk management activated. And that can then be used as a record where we can actually define what are our critical functions. This can then also be used in BCM. It can be helped to actually define the criticality on that DORA critical function. And then it can be linked to the different business services that are actually used to provide that critical important function. So that's what you see here. For example, onboarding of a new client. Obviously we need to know your customer's system for that. And then we can actually map the different dependencies. And these are then different IT assets that we're dependent on. So a certain server that is needed to actually run this process. but it can also be other platforms, like maybe it's the actual know your customer platform that we need, or maybe we're depending on some third-party supplier as well for a screening process. So that's where that comes in. And here on the left side, we can then also see who is responsible to deliver that support. So are these internal teams that are doing this? Do we have some internal agreements in place for that as well? Or is it the third-party vendor that we also need to manage from a DORA perspective? And that's where we link in then our contracts, and where we then also look at SLAs, that we have the proper SLAs in place. And this can then also help to build up that DORA register of information, where we can look from a DORA critical function all the way down to all the different dependencies and see which third parties, which contracts are in place to actually manage those critical functions. And as already mentioned as well by Alexander, is that ownership is super important. So also to make sure that data stays accurate, that we know who to contact when something goes wrong, is very important to have these owners defined. So that's where we can set certain attributes. We can make sure that for each of our critical functions, we have an owner assigned that is responsible for the end-to-end mapping. We understand who the architects that are involved to actually that can help us to do the proper modeling as well, that we know the different application service owners and the different teams that deliver the support. So that's really where CSDM can actually help to have that full model, full traceability of all the different components that support the DORA critical functions.
May I add here, Adriaan, as well? One feedback point that I think we've sometimes received working through this is, this looks like a lot. Do we need full-blown service mapping? Do we need the Ferrari of all the licensing to be able to do this? Will this now become like an enormous IT operations project all of a sudden? And I think here as well, even though the model may look maybe a little bit intimidating and so forth, our experience is as well that it's about finding like a reasonable level of ambition, let's say, on like to which granularity should you map things. And even if you don't have something like service mapping, you can come pretty far on other methods. We don't need to discuss those in detail today, but I'm not sure what your opinion is on this, but that is something which I think we've been in a lot of discussions around with organizations, that it looks very scary, but it also needs to be maintainable from a governance perspective, right?
Yeah, and I think there as well, it's don't try to do this full in-depth end-to-end model from day one as well. So I think it's already a big step to first of all understand which systems are actually involved to deliver these DORA critical functions. Like what we also see is a lot of this information is unfortunately still in the head of people. Like it's maybe not even documented anywhere yet. So later I will also explain that in the 6-step approach, but it's so important to bring these people together and to really understand what is actually being delivered and what are the different systems that are involved. So that should be your first level of ambition, I would say, making sure that you understand, hey, these are my critical functions, they are delivered, and we need these systems to deliver these processes. And then the next step will come where you will actually look at like, what does that mean from a IT asset perspective? What different service do I need? Can we automate that with service mapping? Does this system actually depend on another system to be able to run? Do we need the AD to be able to access? Like these type of questions come after that. But my recommendation would be start first with the foundation and understanding high over how that dependency looks like. All right, then we come to the 6-step approach. So yeah, so this is all based on the different projects that we have done. Like we have helped a lot of organizations in the past 3 years on their DORA journey. And yeah, what we actually see, and it might sound again a bit, yeah, as a basic thing to say, but it all starts with governance and ownership. So it's very, very important that clear ownership is defined for starting with the CIF, that you have one person assigned to actually take that accountability as well for having these critical functions mapped end to end. That can be someone from the business, someone that actually understands as well with the value that it's being provided and understands the business impact there as well if something goes wrong. Then the same for the different services that are involved. Who is the owner of that? Who takes the responsibility that it's correctly maintained in the CMDB? And then moreover, also the different CIs, the different IT assets, they all should have their responsibility assigned. And yeah, with that, it's important that you also create a clear service framework. So something that can actually help the organization understand the different responsibilities that come with that, and that they also understand how things are connected. And yeah, one thing is having that ownership assigned and having it clearly defined how it should be functioned, but it's also very important that you set up certain controls. So where we can automate things, that's great. Go for automation, we would say, because it's also otherwise a lot of work to maintain the CMDB and the data that is there. But yeah, this whole business context, that's something that needs to be manually maintained. And also one of our participants mentioned already would like to talk a bit more about the data verification, data attestation. That's where this comes in, and it's very important to set that up properly as well. So where you should have a periodic review of your critical important functions, you can set up these tasks as well, so that you actually have that checkbox each and every year or every quarter to verify that the CIF owner says, yes, this data is still up to date and still correct. And if he sees it's not, that he takes the proper steps to actually fix and update that data. So yeah, that's very important to set that up, and that you can then also report on internally. You can create dashboards around this. You can make sure that it becomes common practice to maintain that data, this manual data. So very important to have these controls in place. Then once that foundation is defined, we obviously also need to define the crown jewels, we call them here, but yeah, your critical important functions. And yeah, as Alexander already mentioned, look at granularity there as well. Did you really define it in the right way? Is it not too big of a bucket like payments? Should it be split up? That's where, that's where you identify and then also make sure that they are structurally registered in the CMDB. And they can be either as a capability or a process or any other table, but make sure that you have that data in ServiceNow, that you can then also connect it to the rest of the CMDB. And then with CSDM, you can then bring in the rest of the context as well. So we can understand what is the business output, what are we actually delivering, and what are the different systems that are used to provide that. And this can then also help in putting priority in what do we model first. What we mentioned before as well, don't try to do everything at once, but really try to put a bit of a plan towards that as well, and start building that initial DORA inventory as well that can be used for your reporting purposes. So this would be then your first ambition level, I would say. then obviously we need to start mapping the dependencies. So we need to understand, which services are actually involved to deliver this DORA critical function. And as we also mentioned from our research, we see that IT and business are not always aligned. Here is very, very important from an early stage to involve the different business owners, architects, and tech leads, bring them together. Like we do it with workshops, either online, but even nicer if you do it in person, where you have a whiteboard and you start to actually draw, how does this actually work? Like, what are the different systems that we use to provide this service, so that we can get that initial map in place. And then it would be great if you can link it to also the different IT components as well, the different CIs, configuration management terminology. And great if we can automate that, if we can use tools like service mapping, that would be great, that we can connect this in a more automated way, but otherwise start with the manual steps. Start linking in the service that are used, start thinking of all these different components that are needed to provide that critical function. And that should lead to full visibility once that is properly done. Then the next step would be also for building later on to your DORA register of information, is to start connecting your contracts. And that can be done either in ServiceNow if you have the contract module, or otherwise in some other fashion. But let's make sure that we can understand that the contract is related to which service, or which service is dependent on a third party, and what contract do we actually have in place, and what kind of SLAs do we have there, and so which legal entities are involved for these contracts. So that's where then later on, if you have the contract module in ServiceNow, that's great. Then you can also use the accelerator module of ServiceNow for DORA, and it can really help you also to define the different attributes that are not needed for the DORA register of information. But then ultimately you can then also say like, hey, which third parties are actually supporting this CIF, and when we need to provide the register of information to the regulators, we can automate it or create automated processes to pull that information that is audit ready, and to overcome that manual step, which is quite a burden, we've been told. So and moreover, in step 5, what we see is what is very beneficial when you have that data in one place, when you have these proper dependency maps in place, when we understand the third parties as well, how they are connected, that this data can actually be used in your business continuity management as well. So when we're looking from a continuity perspective, obviously we need to have insight, we need to understand what is involved, which vendors are involved, so that we can then also properly think of like what are our recovery strategies, what do we do in case of an incident. We can plan for the testing as well, that we have proper test scenarios in place as well, and that it's not something that is based on static information, maybe from discussions. No, it's actually based on real-time information in the CMDB. And actually, we've seen it actually work as well in practice in ServiceNow. We've helped the organizations to also map this on BCM, and you can truly use the power of the platform there as well, and save a lot of manual effort, and also there is obviously also a chance that you forget about things, that you don't think about certain components to be part of it, and then that's then a missed opportunity for your continuity plan. And then lastly, once we have all these data there, that can also be really helpful to automate steps. So we believe that true operational resilience is actually where you don't have to do all these steps manually. So whenever there is an IT issue, an incident, we automatically want to know, is this an incident? Is it impacting one of our DORA critical functions? If yes, we need to get everyone together and start to fix this as soon as possible. So instead of manually looking through certain processes, no, we want to have that automated flag there. Same with if we're doing a change, we can automate also to check, will this change impact one of our CIFs? And if yes, obviously we need to handle it with care, and we need to plan a proper time to do this change to minimize impact on our customers. Also, you can use automation to become more proactive, can be more system driven in the compliance as well. So also thinking about reporting, we can have these reports pulled at any moment, whenever it's needed. We have it ready and it is automated. So yeah, this is some practical advice, some practical steps to take in order to become more DORA compliant. And again, this is where we really see big improvements as well at organizations that we worked with.
Yeah, super nice. I see we're almost running out of time with 3 minutes left. So what are the next steps from here, Adriaan?
Yeah, so again, it's a bit of a repeat, but start very small. So don't try to model everything at once. Focus maybe on 1 or 2 critical functions and really map it end to end. So you can also showcase the value of the time that is invested. Focus on governance, making sure that you have these different owners assigned and that they also understand their responsibility. Also to make sure that the data remains up to date. And yeah, as said, put the bar low at first. So go for this simple model first, where we understand which services are supporting our DORA critical functions, and then put that ambition level every time up and start to model it more granular as you go. So yeah, these would be our main advices to focus on.
Yeah, fantastic. Yes, so where to go from here? Thank you so much, Adriaan. I love when we are able to correlate, proven research and sort of industry maturity to practical approaches. And here you see again these great pictures of us. So if you want to discuss more around these topics, then scan that QR code, and we're always happy to dive in deeper into meetings. But more importantly, I think what we want to highlight here is this benchmark report, which we have put a lot of effort in. So that's available as well on our website, on our research unit website. You can scan the QR code there as well to download it. And it actually dives into all of these aspects even more granularly. And with that being said, we only have 1 minute left here, and there have been some questions, but I think we will have to get back to those separately. But I'd like to thank the audience for patching in here today, for showing an interest into digital resilience. It's obviously a topic we are very passionate about. And also, as I said, this will be uploaded on YouTube. And please do follow us on LinkedIn. We provide a lot of materials there in digital resilience, in DORA, but also other regulations. So, of course, we hope to continue the conversation there. But most importantly, I'd like to thank you, Adriaan, as well, for all your insights here today. So,
it's a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's continue the journey of making Europe digital resilient. And with that being said, thank you all for joining. Have a fantastic day. We hope that this was useful, and yeah, let's continue the conversation in other places. So see you around out there.